Hello, my name is Venitra, and when I packed up my life and moved 3 states away, my parents didn't even register that I was gone. Not a single phone call, not one question, just silence. That same week, they uploaded a smiling family photo with the caption, "All of us together," and I wasn't anywhere in it. But that was only the surface layer. Beneath that, things were uglier. They sold the piece of land my grandmother had left in my name. They forged signatures, took out loans under my identity, and then, as if none of that mattered, they called me asking for help, like I was the one who owed them something. They still saw me as the quiet one, the obedient daughter, the shadow in the background. But what happens when a shadow learns how to step into the light and claim it as her own? Would you stay silent, or would you build something so undeniable they'd have no choice but to see you? Let me tell you what I did. I stood in front of the house, my hand hovering inches from the doorbell, wondering if the wood under the porch had always creaked like that, or if time had finally worn it down. The paint on the right side of the windowsill was still chipped. The mailbox still leaned slightly to the left. Everything looked the same, but none of it felt like mine. Maybe it never had. I caught my reflection in the car window behind me. The woman staring back wore confidence like armor, zipped all the way up, clean, controlled, put together. But beneath that, my fingers trembled just enough to give me away. I steadied my breathing and pressed the bell. The door opened slower than I remembered, and then there she was, my mother, a face I used to know without effort. Her eyes scanned me like I was a stranger trying to sell her something she didn't want. A second passed, then another. "Sorry?" she said, brushing a strand of gray behind her ear. "Who are you here to see?" It took me a moment to respond because I couldn't decide what stung more, that she didn't recognize me or that she sounded completely sincere. "It's me," I said, "Venitra." Her lips parted slightly. Something flickered behind her eyes. Calculation. Then came a tight, rehearsed smile, the kind people use when they've been caught but won't admit it. Oh, right, of course," she murmured, but she didn't step forward, didn't hug me, didn't even open the door fully, so I walked in myself. Inside, the air smelled like lemon polish and thyme. The hallway looked the same, but everything else had shifted. The living room furniture was different. The couch was new, and on the wall where my graduation photo used to hang, there was now a framed image of my brother Darnell shaking hands with a city councilman, like he had just saved the world. Above the mantel sat a recent family photo. Everyone was there. Darnell, my sister, their spouses, cousins, even the dog. Just not me. I walked down the hall to what used to be my room. The walls had been repainted a pale beige. My posters were gone. The bookshelf my uncle built for me when I was 10 had been replaced with a printer and a filing cabinet. The space had been turned into a home office, functional, quiet, completely indifferent to the fact that I had ever existed there. That night, I checked into a small motel at the edge of town. Lorraine said there wasn't any room left in the house. Said it like she was running a hotel I didn't have a reservation for. After a lukewarm shower and a vending machine dinner, I lay on the bed scrolling through my phone out of habit. That's when I saw it. A post from my sister. "Happy birthday, Mom. So lucky to have all of us here. Family complete." I stared at it, waiting for anger or hurt to rise. Something sharp, something loud. But all I felt was confirmation settling in quietly. I let out a small laugh. The kind that barely makes a sound, the kind you use when something is too cruel to cry about, but too familiar to fight. 18 months ago, I left, packed everything, moved 3 states away, and not once did anyone call to ask where I'd gone. I used to think it was my silence that kept them distant, but the truth was simpler. They never noticed I was gone. Sleep didn't come that night. The motel clock blinked through the hours while I stared at the ceiling. My thoughts weren't racing. They had settled into something still and certain. Just before sunrise, I got up, pulled on a sweater, and sat on the floor with the duffel bag I hadn't unpacked. From a side pocket, I pulled out a small plastic sleeve. Inside were folded receipts and a greeting card, its cover faded with roses and gold lettering. To the woman who gave me life. I looked at the florist receipt. 2 years ago, sent to this same address. The message inside written in my own handwriting. Thank you for everything you did when I didn't know how to say it. Love, V. The bouquet had been expensive. It was the first big thing I did after landing a major deal in Houston. I wanted to mark it with gratitude, even if no one asked, even if no one would say thank you. Except someone did, just not to me. I remembered the post clearly. Thanks for the beautiful bouquet, sweetheart. You always know how to make me feel special. Love you, baby girl. Posted by my mother, tagged to my sister, captioned, from your favorite daughter. Back then, I told myself it must have been a mix-up. Maybe the florist made a mistake. Maybe something got switched. But deep down, I knew better. And now, sitting on that worn motel carpet with the card still sealed in its envelope, I understood exactly what happened. She knew where those flowers came from. She just chose who they should belong to. Later that morning, after dry toast and 2 cups of bitter coffee, I drove back to the house. No call, no warning, no need. If no one noticed when I left, why would it matter if I returned? The driveway was empty. Good. Darnell's truck was gone. I parked quietly behind the shed and made my way to the garage. The side doors still stuck on the hinge. I eased it open carefully. Inside, everything smelled like dust, old paint, and rust. In the back corner sat a stack of storage boxes. I recognized the handwriting instantly. One was labeled Venetra, school stuff. I crouched and pulled it down, brushing away a dead spider. Inside were notebooks, binders, my high school yearbook, and beneath them a manila envelope. I knew what it was before I even opened it. The envelope was still sealed but worn, the edges bent, the bottom corner chewed up like it had been dragged across the floor. Dog hair clung to it, dirt smudged the surface. My handwriting was still on the front. For Mom, please read. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. She never read it, never cared to. That letter came from one of the hardest moments of my life, when I left college after a breakdown, when I was trying to understand how my own mother could look at me like I didn't matter, and she had taken it and treated it like scrap, probably lined the dog's bed with it, thought it was trash. I stood there for a moment, then placed it back into the box, this time on top. Message received. I walked out without touching anything else. No slammed doors, no tears. Not yet. Instead of heading back to the motel, I drove into town. There was a small cafe near the courthouse, faded menus, chipped mugs. I ordered black coffee and a breakfast sandwich, opened my laptop, and pulled up a folder labeled Mid-South Acquisitions. Inside were files for rural properties nearing foreclosure. One address caught my attention, my old house, the one I had just walked out of. Final acquisition stage, 5 days. I stared at it for a while. No panic, no hesitation, just stillness. I didn't remove it, didn't comment. I flagged it as internal interest, marked ownership confirmation pending, and closed the laptop. Then I took a sip of my coffee and leaned back. Let them think I came back because I missed them. Let them believe they still had control. The truth was, they never saw me coming either. By Sunday, I had already accepted what I wouldn't hear. No apologies, no explanations. I just needed to see it clearly for myself, to confirm that what I had been avoiding wasn't confusion, it was intention. I arrived 5 minutes late on purpose. Brunch was already underway. Through the window, I saw Darnell at the head of the table, laughing like he owned the room. When I stepped inside, no one turned. The smell of bacon and cinnamon filled the air. Every seat was taken. Family, extended family, even neighbors. I cleared my throat. Lorraine glanced up and gave a polite nod, like I was a guest she barely knew. No invitation to sit, no welcome back. Darnell didn't even look at me. I grabbed a bar stool from the kitchen and placed it at the edge of the table, sitting with the kind of quiet grace you learn in places you were never meant to belong. Food passed around me, not to me. Conversations flowed over me like I wasn't there. I reached for eggs, the plate shifted away. I poured juice for myself. No one asked if I wanted coffee. The silence wasn't accidental, it was practiced. After a while, Lorraine stood and tapped her glass. I want to take a moment to recognize the one who's been holding this family together. Her gaze landed on Darnell. To the child who stayed, who took responsibility when others wandered, we're proud of you. Applause followed. People stood, glasses raised. I smiled, not because I felt it, because I had learned how to wear it. Then Uncle Morris turned to me, squinting slightly like he was trying to place me. He said, "You used to write poems, didn't you? Back in school, that was your thing." He chuckled before I could respond. "Well, that's something." A quiet laugh came from somewhere behind a napkin. Darnell finally looked at me, smiling in a way that didn't bother hiding anything. I excused myself when the meal ended. No one stopped me. In the hallway, I passed that same photo again. Darnell beside a politician, smiling, celebrated. As I walked toward the guest room, I noticed a cabinet slightly open. Something inside caught my eye. Curiosity didn't feel like revenge, it felt necessary. I stepped closer and found neatly stacked legal folders, all labeled in Lorraine's handwriting. Tax documents, medical bills, property deeds. One folder stood out, Granny Pearl land title. I opened it carefully. Inside was the notarized deed from my grandmother's estate. The property had once been divided equally between all the grandchildren. Now there was a revised version, one name, Darnell's. I checked again. My name wasn't there, not even mentioned. No explanation, no conversation. The signature from Granny Pearl looked digital, stamped, flat. Darnell's signature was fresh, ink still sharp. I closed the folder and placed it back exactly where I found it. No pictures, no evidence taken. I shut the cabinet quietly. On my way out, I passed Lorraine. She looked at me with something empty. Not guilt, not shame, just nothing. I nodded once and kept walking. Outside, I sat in my car, the warm air pressing in around me. I rolled the windows down halfway and stayed still. Years ago, my father stood in front of a room full of relatives and said, "She's the delicate one, emotional, not made for big things, a burden, but she's ours." I was 14 when I heard that. I thought I had outgrown it, but now I understood. They hadn't changed their minds. They had just learned to say it without words. The days that followed blurred together. Small errands, short conversations, long drives that felt longer than they should. I moved through Clarksdale like someone playing a role she never auditioned for. The grief wasn't visible, but I felt it settle deep. One afternoon, I stopped at the farmer's market. I was picking through peaches when I heard a familiar voice. "Well, look who's back." I turned to see Mrs. Carla, older, but still warm. I smiled politely. She squeezed my shoulder. "I'm so glad your mama came through that surgery okay," she said. The peach slipped slightly in my hand. "Surgery?" I asked. She blinked. "You didn't know? Gallbladder. She was in the hospital a few days ago. She's home now." I nodded, forcing a response, but my ears burned. After I left, I didn't go back to the motel. I drove aimlessly, stopped at a gas station, bought water I didn't want, sat in the car staring at the wheel. They didn't forget to tell me. They chose not to. That evening, I got invited to Darnell's pre-engagement dinner. It wasn't a formal thing, just close friends and family, according to the message Lorraine forwarded to me, without a single greeting attached. I showed up on time, slipped in through the side door like a background actor who knows not to block the camera. The house was decorated with twinkle lights and photo frames lined up on side tables. Smiling faces, matching t-shirts from vacations I wasn't invited to. After dinner plates had been cleared, everyone moved into the living room. Lorraine clicked the remote and a flat screen lit up. "Let's take a walk down memory lane," she announced, with enthusiasm she never once used for anything involving me. Music played, the kind of sentimental background score that makes people tear up over nothing. Childhood photos, baseball games, dance recitals, first days of school, all edited into a clean, glowing montage. I waited, and never showed up. Even when they played old birthday videos, the camera angles were cropped, tight frames, faces turned just enough to cut me out without making it obvious. When the slideshow ended, everyone clapped. Darnell kissed his fiancée on the cheek. Lorraine dabbed her eyes. I got up and walked to the porch. Outside, the air smelled like cut grass and charcoal. I pulled out my phone. No messages. I scrolled through old emails. The last one from Lorraine had been a forwarded electric bill. No greeting, no context. 2 years ago. Back inside, dessert was being passed around. Brownies and vanilla ice cream. I walked toward the table but stopped halfway. The chair I'd been sitting in earlier was gone. Someone had taken it, probably to the other room. No one noticed. I stood for a moment, then walked into the kitchen, fixed a plate, and sat by the back door. No one said a word. I didn't expect them to. For years, I thought the worst thing they could do was forget me. I was wrong. The worst thing was knowing they remembered and erased me. Anyway, I left the house that night without saying goodbye. No one followed me. No one asked if I made it back to the motel. It was almost funny how easy it had become for them to treat me like a loose thread no one wanted to pull. 2 nights later, around 10:30, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. It was local. I hesitated, then picked up. Hello? A familiar voice answered, warm in tone, but tight at the edges. Hi, sweetheart, it's Mom. She said it like we'd spoken yesterday, like we shared recipes or traded weekend plans. I hope I didn't wake you. I know it's late. But your brother's in a bit of a bind with the mortgage. Nothing catastrophic, just complicated. She forced a chuckle. He's just stretched thin. The market's so unpredictable these days. I said nothing. We were wondering, she continued, if maybe your boss might be willing to help out. Just a short-term thing, bridge loan, strictly professional. You know how folks talk, we can't have people thinking we can't keep up. It was surreal. She was asking me to tap into a relationship she assumed I had for a favor she framed as saving the family's name. I stayed quiet long enough for her to speak again. Manitra, you there? Still silent. Well, anyway, think about it, okay? It would mean a lot to Darnell and to me. She didn't say, I miss you. She didn't ask how I was. She just wanted access through a boss I supposedly worked under. I hung up without answering. The next afternoon, I stopped for gas on the way back from a property inspection. As I filled my tank, Mr. Franklin shuffled over from the pump across the lot. He still wore the same flannel cap and walked with a limp from his army years. Didn't expect to see you back in these parts, he said, nodding. Didn't expect to be back, I replied. He looked at me for a moment, then leaned in slightly. I know it ain't my place, but I figured you ought to know. Your mama and Darnell are about to lose the house. They borrowed heavy, put everything under his name. I stared at him. He kept talking, softer now. Bank already turned them down. They're scrambling. Don't want nobody to find out. My hands were still on the pump handle, but my body had gone still. They're not coming to you because you're family, he said. They're coming because they're out of options. That night, I sat in a quiet booth at a small cafe near downtown. Laptop open, documents pulled up. The address of the house I grew up in was highlighted in yellow. Pending foreclosure. Purchase negotiations already in progress. I didn't need to ask who was handling the file. I was. My name sat at the top of the acquisition paperwork. Co-owner of the firm currently working to finalize the buy. I flagged the file for internal handling. Not to stop it, to protect it from interference, from family, from sentiment. A few minutes later, I picked up my phone and called the number Lorraine had used. She answered on the first ring. Venitra, Mom, you asked if my boss could help with Darnell's mortgage, I said flatly. She hesitated. Yes, did you talk to him? I didn't give her the chance to keep spinning. I am the boss. Silence. I don't approve financial rescues for people who forget I exist until they're underwater. I could hear her breathe in sharply. She tried to recover. That's not fair, baby. You know how family works. Sometimes we fall apart, but we're still blood. Ask Darnell, I said, my voice calm. He's got all the titles, doesn't he? There was a soft gasp, then a sniffle. She was trying not to cry, or trying to make sure I heard her doing it. But I didn't raise my voice, I didn't soften my tone. "I've been invisible long enough," I said. "Let's keep it consistent." Then I hung up. For a moment, I just sat there. The hum of the fridge behind the counter filled the space around me. The waitress brought a refill without asking. I stirred my coffee slowly. The empire they ignored was about to own the house they worshipped. The next morning, I got a text from Lorraine. "Can you swing by the house? Just want to talk, nothing heavy." She even added a smiley face. I stared at it for a minute, then replied, "Sure, 2:00. Before heading over, I stopped at a cafe and picked up an iced tea, then made one more stop at the firm's satellite office downtown. I asked Hannah, one of my legal advisors, to come along. I didn't tell her why, just asked if she could meet me at the gas station 2 blocks from the house and wait in the car just in case. She didn't ask questions. That's why I trusted her. At 2:05, I pulled up the gravel driveway, parked, and walked up to the porch like I wasn't walking into a setup. Lorraine met me at the door with a practiced smile and a plate of lemon cookies. "Darnell's here too," she said, as if that were normal. "Just a quick thing to go over." He was already at the kitchen table, papers laid out, pen clipped neatly to the top. Lorraine sat next to him. The plate of cookies stayed untouched. Darnell gestured to the stack. "It's just a signature. Mom's credit is shot, and the bank won't give her the time of day without a cosigner." I looked down at the document. Pages and pages of dense legal text. But one thing stood out in bold, underlined font: joint responsibility. All financial burden shared equally by signing parties. No clause for removal. He smiled the way people do when they think they've rehearsed their part. "Well, come on," he said. "No risk to you. You've got the money. You don't even need to do anything. Just sign so we can keep the house." Lorraine chimed in softly. "You owe this family something, don't you?" I pulled out my bag, unzipped the side pocket, and set a small digital recorder on the table. "Would you mind repeating that?" They both froze. Darnell's mouth opened, but no words came. Lorraine's smile faded. "I'm going to take this home," I said calmly, collecting the papers, "and have my legal team look it over." Darnell scoffed. "Seriously? You're dragging lawyers into this?" "You did," I replied, "when you brought me into something that's already falling apart." I stood up. Lorraine reached out gently. "Venetra, this is your family. We're not trying to trap you, just asking for help." I met her eyes. "You're asking for access. That's not the same thing." On the way back, I stopped by a diner for a late lunch. It was the kind of place where everyone knew someone's aunt or cousin, where gossip passed like condiments across the table. I sat at the counter and ordered coffee. 10 minutes later, someone tapped my shoulder. It was Denise Chapman. We'd gone to school together, different circles, but still familiar. She leaned in like we were best friends. "I heard you're still mad." I turned slowly. "Darnell says you're freezing them out, just letting them sink, that you like watching it happen." I didn't blink. "You'd be amazed how loud guilt sounds when it's dressed up as duty." She opened her mouth, thought better of it, and left. Back in my car, I laid the contract out across the passenger seat and read every word. Hidden beneath the jargon and fine print was a clear trap, one I was expected to walk into with my eyes closed. The agreement didn't protect me, it exposed me. If Darnell missed a payment, which he would, I'd be liable for the full amount, and there was no clause to opt out. It was signed by him, prepared by his friend's firm, already notarized. I folded the papers neatly, tore the corner just slightly, slid them into an envelope and attached a sticky note. "This is the last time you mistake silence for compliance." That evening, just as I was sorting through emails at the motel, my phone buzzed again. Voicemail from Lorraine. Her voice no longer warm. "I raised you better than this. I don't know who you've become, but people are talking. People are asking why you're acting so cold. You're embarrassing this family." I hit play again, then forwarded the file to Hannah. After a pause, I recorded my response. "You didn't raise me. You raised an image, a story, something you could point to in public. But that version of me died the day you taught me love was conditional. I'm not here to perform anymore. I'm not here to be silent for your comfort." I hit send, and for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly.
They thought I'd fold like before, but this time I brought paper that bites back. The courthouse wasn't grand, just tired. Beige carpet, flickering fluorescent lights, and a podium with a microphone that squeaked every time someone adjusted it. I sat in the back row while names were called. Most people were here to dispute fines, finalize property sales, settle debts they couldn't carry anymore. When they called the Henderson case, I stood. I didn't rush. Inside the small hearing room, Darnell was already seated at the front table, Lorraine beside him flipping nervously through paperwork. A few locals filled the back, probably city staff and a couple of reporters fishing for small-town drama. When I walked in, I didn't look at either of them. I walked straight to the desk and handed over the final signed transfer documents. My name, my firm, everything in order. The clerk gave a brief nod and announced, "Acquisition confirmed, effective immediately." Whispers followed like smoke. Darnell leaned toward Lorraine, muttering, "Bet it's one of those out-of-state developers, probably going to tear it all down." Then the back door opened again. This time it was me who stepped through, dressed in navy, clipboard in hand, no apology in my stride. Silence, the kind that doesn't need shushing.
I walked past the folding chairs, past the city seal on the wall, and took my place at the other table. The clerk cleared his throat. Just to clarify for the record, Miss Venetra Henderson holds 61% ownership in the purchasing entity and has acted as the primary decision-maker in this acquisition. Lorraine's eyes widened. Darnell froze. The banker beside them stammered. She's had power of attorney on this deal since last quarter. I finished for him without looking away from the panel. Darnell blinked hard. You went behind our backs. No, I said I went through the front door. You just weren't watching. I turned toward the counsel. This isn't a family dispute. This is a business conclusion. Lorraine stood abruptly. How could you do this? This house is your legacy too. I pulled a folder from my bag and opened it. Inside were printouts, forged applications, digitally altered email threads, loan documents submitted with my name but not my hand. This, I said, holding up a sheet, is the application Darnell submitted 3 years ago using my identity as collateral. I passed another page across the table, and this is the timeline of wire transfers, accounts opened using my SSN, addresses tied to my name but listed as authorized user D. Henderson. A low gasp rippled through the back row. I didn't raise my voice. You used me repeatedly, but I made sure every misuse had a breadcrumb, and now those breadcrumbs lead here. Darnell started to speak, then stopped. His hand trembled as he slid it off the table. One of the council members asked, "Miss Henderson, do you intend to press charges?" I looked at Darnell for the first time. Not yet, but I've started the clock. Outside, the sun was merciless. Reporters swarmed the steps like bees to a cracked jar of honey. Is it true you just reclaimed your childhood home? Are you planning to evict your own family? Is this about revenge? I didn't answer any of them. I stepped into the car where Hannah waited in the front seat, files already packed away in the back. She looked over her glasses. Well, I exhaled slowly, it's done. And what happens now? They live with it, I said, with the silence, the kind I lived in for 30 years. Behind us, Lorraine sat on the edge of the sidewalk, head in her hands. Darnell paced angrily, trying to talk on his phone, but no one was picking up. As we pulled away, I didn't feel relief, not victory either, just weight shifting. I didn't have to destroy them, I just let the truth finish what they started. The following week, I was back in Houston, buried in zoning files and back-to-back meetings, trying to push aside the shadow that Clarksdale had left trailing behind me. I didn't say anything about what had happened in the courthouse, not the full version, at least. The ones who needed to know already did. The rest, they'd hear it eventually, the same way I always had, fragmented, distorted, softened by distance and time until it no longer resembled truth, only rumor. On Thursday morning, just after 9, the front desk buzzed up to the office. Monica answered, then knocked on my door a moment later, holding a padded manila envelope with no postage, no return address, just hand-delivered, anonymous. I paused my notes on a zoning revision for a commercial lot in Midtown and took the envelope. It was thin but dense, the kind of weight that meant trouble, or at least something meant to stir it. Inside was a set of photocopied documents neatly stapled. At the top, bold lettering stamped across the first page, Property Transfer, Pearl Henderson Estate. My eyes stopped moving. I knew immediately what it was, even before I flipped past the title page. My grandmother's name, Pearl Henderson, appeared on the signature line, but the signature below it wasn't hers. Not even close. Her handwriting had always been a little wild, like her voice, loud and swinging with mood. This was tidy, mechanical, a forgery done by someone who had watched her sign checks but never knew her wrist. I turned to the notarization page. The date, 5 years ago. The notary, a firm out of Clarksdale that didn't even exist anymore. Shut down, disgraced, dead ends. All of it. And then came the name that kept appearing like a bad habit, Darnell. Once as executive, once as witness, and again as heir. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My stomach wasn't tight with shock. That had passed years ago. What I felt was the cold weight of inevitability. While I'd been rebuilding from scratch, scraping together some version of normal 3 states away, they'd been busy rewriting the story without me, without truth. I called Hannah. "Get this submitted to probate," I told her quietly. "No press, no announcements." "I'll file it before end of day," she said. "Do you want to be present at the hearing?" "I'll be there alone." The court date came quickly, Tuesday morning. The courthouse smelled like dust and old paperwork. I showed up early. No family, no bystanders, just me, Hannah in a charcoal suit, and a judge who looked like he'd seen too many versions of this same story. Hannah handled everything. She was clinical but compelling, methodical as she laid out evidence like a quiet war. She showed digital timelines, voice recordings, sworn affidavits from people who remembered Pearl's voice in those last years, people who remembered who was really there and who wasn't, people who hadn't forgotten what family meant, even if family had forgotten them. There were no objections, no lawyers standing up to argue. No one came to contest it. 15 minutes later, the judge signed off. The documents were declared invalid. The land, nearly 20 acres of hardwood and memory, was legally and irrevocably mine. Always had been, by birth and by blood. The forged transfer was nullified, erased from record like it had never existed. That night, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, lights off except for one lamp. I pulled out an old leather-bound journal from a drawer I hadn't opened in years. Between 2 dog-eared pages, there was a letter, yellowed at the edges, folded 3 times, still unmailed. It began, "Dear Mom, I don't know how to say this without sounding ungrateful." But I read it slowly, as if reading someone else's handwriting, and maybe I was. The person who wrote that letter was younger, more hopeful. They believed in reconciliation, in clarity, in second chances. It wasn't a bad letter. If anything, it was kind. Too kind. But it didn't belong anymore. Not to me. Not to the life I'd built since. I tore it down the fold lines, piece by piece. Not in anger, just with finality. There are some truths that outlive their purpose. Some stories you outgrow. The next morning, I drafted a new letter. It didn't start with "Dear," no greeting, no farewell, just a plain, unvarnished message. "You may continue to reside on the property until your affairs are settled. I will not evict you. I will not return. This is not an act of punishment. It is a boundary for your dignity and for mine." No signature, just initials. No address, just a P.O. box. I slipped it into an envelope and dropped it in the mailbox downstairs, then walked a block and a half to a quiet cafe, ordered coffee, sat by the window, and watched Houston start its day. That evening, I was back on the highway. The Clarksdale exit came up on my right. Familiar green signs, same mile markers, same pull. But I didn't slow down. I didn't look. My hand stayed steady on the wheel, the skyline ahead glowing like a promise I could finally believe in. In the rearview mirror, I saw nothing I needed to return to. Forgiveness isn't a performance, and silence doesn't always mean surrender. Sometimes it means freedom. Sometimes it's both. It had rained the night before, one of those quiet storms that doesn't announce itself with thunder, just slips in and rearranges the air. The next morning, everything outside my window looked sharper, like the skyline had been freshly outlined. I brewed coffee and stood barefoot on my balcony, watching the sun push through the clouds. There was no sense of conclusion, just space, breathing room. Later that day, I met my team at a duplex in East Austin, newly renovated, nothing grand, just clean lines, soft yellow paint, a pair of modest porches, the kind of home that doesn't boast but offers safety. I walked through the rooms slowly, hand brushing over walls, fingertips grazing windowsills. It wasn't mine in the way Clarkdale was mine. It was mine in a better way, not inherited, not stolen back, built. Chosen. My assistant, Tasha, stood in the hallway, iPad in hand. "We're good to sign off," she said. "Want me to finalize the paperwork with the foundation?" I nodded. She paused. "Why this one, though? We've passed on bigger properties." I looked around one last time. Because it's not about square footage, it's about message. She tilted her head. What message? That no one should have to earn the right to be seen. That afternoon, I returned to the office. There was a missed call on my phone. Clarksdale area code. No voicemail, just a call that rang once and hung up. I didn't call back. I didn't need to wonder who it was. Some bridges don't need burning. They just don't lead anywhere anymore. I hit delete and tucked the phone away. That night, I hosted dinner at my house. My house. No last-minute invitations, no passive-aggressive questions about seating charts, just my team, a few close friends, and my mentor, Mrs. Pearson, who'd once told me, "Sometimes family isn't blood. It's who shows up when your name isn't trending." We had gumbo and cornbread. Someone brought peach cobbler from a bakery downtown. There was music, soft Motown in the background, and conversation that didn't circle around survival or obligation. Midway through the evening, I excused myself to the hallway. On the wall hung a photo, the day we opened our first office. I was in the center, flanked by Hannah and Tasha, everyone grinning, exhausted and proud. That picture used to make me ache. Now it felt like proof. A guest wandered over, a friend of a friend. He pointed to the photo and said, "You've built something incredible. Does your family know?" I smiled. They'll hear about it eventually, but it's not for them. He looked puzzled, then nodded. Before everyone left, I handed out thank you notes. Not because it was expected, but because I wanted to. No strings, no debts, just appreciation. After the dishes were cleared and the last hugs exchanged, I sat alone with a cup of tea and my journal. I hadn't written in it since I tore up that letter, but tonight felt like it needed marking. I wrote slowly. You don't win by being invited back. You win by realizing you never needed to audition in the first place. You win by knowing you're enough, even when no one claps. I closed the journal, set it beside the lamp, and walked to the balcony again. The storm had passed. The wind had quieted. My breath felt steady in my chest. They thought I was a silence they could manage. But this empire, it's not made of walls or land. It's made of the woman they never saw.